Welcome to this episode of the Business Builders podcast. It's a podcast that is dedicated towards the construction and trade industry, where you won't hear anything out of a textbook. You will hear real life stories from real people, real construction entrepreneurs that have had and overcome issues in their business journeys. And today's guest is John Halliwell of Transgas. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to you and tell us about your journey, please.
Okay, well, firstly, thanks for the invite. Much appreciated. I think like lots of people who get into the industry, I never was at school going, one day I want to be a gasman. I did decide university wasn't going to be for me. That's when my dad was badgering me about, well, you're going to have to get a job, aren't you? And he was badgering me, and then in assembly at school, British Gas were offering apprenticeships. So I'll apply for that, keep my dad happy. So I applied for one of those, and about four lots of aptitude tests and interviews later, I got one of the 10 apprenticeships that was on offer, and that was how I got into the industry. I owe British Gas a lot in that they spent 3 years investing in me across the whole sector of the heating industry. No plumbing, just the heating, but installs and service and breakdown, which a lot of engineers tend to only do one or the other. The ones that can do both usually end up setting about on their own journey and starting a business, which I always knew one day I would start my own business. I didn't know when the timing of that would be, but I left British Gas to go travelling for a year, came back, got offered some contract work around Watford for some friends, and then as a result of that got offered to set my own business up through working for McAlpine Utility Services in a contract out in Reading. But I had to set my own business up. And years ago, and this is where now and again the word trans in a business these days is it's very different to 22 years ago. And when I was younger and I was driving around working for British Gas, I was always thinking, what would my company name be? And at the time, when I get asked now, how did the company name come about? I always ask, how old are you? And I was asked it the other month, and it's by a 21-year-old. I was like, well, have you heard of the phone book? Was the first question. Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. Like, well, there used to be a company called Transco who looked after the grid, basically what is now SGN, and I think they might have changed it to Cadent again now. Keep changing the name, but at the time it was Transco. So I was thinking, phone book, how do I get close to them, because they get lots of phone calls, and that's how Transgas Services Heating and Plumbing came about. And then from there, it was just me doing the
How long
contract work.
ago would that have been, John?
That was 22 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah, quite. I know I don't look old enough, but
Yeah.
so
The
yeah,
surgery's
yeah,
worked.
I had hair. I had hair then. Yeah, yeah. If you want to keep your hair, don't go into business ownership. So that was 22 years ago, and so I was just doing contract work for initially McAlpine, and then Morrison's and Clancy Dockerer, and it was all they would put new pipes in the street, and I'd go in and put the gas meter back in people's properties, and that was it. And I was doing that for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and you sort of take your brain out when you go to work, and you'd put it back in when you finish, because it's a bit boring. And eventually it was, this is boring, I need to pay somebody to do this now. And so I took on a subcontractor who was the first of what turned out to be many employees or subcontractors over the next 22 years. He did the contract for, I don't know how many years, until eventually they all put it out to tender, and somebody beat us to the tender, and I left that side alone. So that was that. And one October, either 2 or 3 years in, obviously it's a seasonal job that we have. So October time, I decided it's time to get someone in to do that, and I'll go out and get customers. And because I'd had no plumbing training, everyone thinks you can do plumbing if you can do heating. Fixing a toilet or a shower that you've never had any training on is totally different to fixing a boiler. So stick a complex boiler in front of me, and I was happy because I knew I could fix it. Stick a toilet that wasn't flushing properly. Every time I touched them, it all seemed to take hours longer than it should. And I always felt I couldn't charge for the time that basically I was being paid by myself to train using people's toilets and showers and things. So in the end, I decided it's better just to say I'm too busy and stick to central heating. So I did a lot of install work, a lot of service and breakdown work. And initially, I was really shocked that, obviously my accent suggests I'm not from round these parts, and I was really shocked at just how pleased people were that you turned up when you said you would. And I've said this many times, I could have been the worst gas man in the world, but people didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I wasn't, because we grew a decent sized business, but I could have been awful. But people were just overjoyed you turned up when they said you would. And so that got a decent reputation started, and the business just steadily grew year on year. No massive advertising was done. I did spend 1 year a lot of money on a phone book, and I may as well have just
At
given
that
that to
point,
someone else.
were you focusing more on, still obviously sticking with the boilers, but were you also now kind of in terms of marketing and promotions looking at general plumbing work, if you like, as well?
Not at that point. No, when
Right.
it was just me, it was still, I'm just gonna stick to what I'm good at, and just turn down the other work. It was always, oh, I'm too busy, even if I wasn't. I would just say that I was, because no one wants to say I can't do that. It would wonder, well, if you can't do that, how can you do other stuff? Is sort of how I was wondering whether people would think like that or not. So it was just stick to what you're good at and don't get involved in what you're not. That has obviously changed over the course of the business. The likes of underfloor heating is now a big part of the business. I didn't know anything about that probably a decade, 12 years ago, but it was becoming a bigger thing nowadays. When people get an extension, it's unusual if they don't have underfloor heating. And I wouldn't say I was, well, I'd like to think I was an expert in it now. And I went to a quote the other week, and the homeowner was telling me that I've been told I've got to have this, this and this. And the bloke I'd had round, he'd gone away and done an awful lot of research. I was like, well, I don't need to do the research, and you don't need what he's told you. You can have this type of system instead. So the likes of that, or mains water boosting, air conditioning, the company has changed in its offerings, and we now employ plumbers that aren't gas engineers, because we now take plumbing as well. But it's not me that goes and does it.
But going back to what you said then about the unreliability, unfortunately, it's littered. The industry is littered with people that don't deliver on what they say. In that example, they're trying to overprice somebody and take liberties with people because they don't know. And unfortunately, those, shall I call them cowboys, have ruined it for many honest, reputable businesses. Have you come across that a lot in your, when you're going out to price? Do you find that a lot?
Yeah, it's sometimes I wonder if I'm the only gas engineer when I go out and do gas quotes that talks about gas pipe sizing, because the number of times I will have conversations of, anyone talk to you about the size of your gas pipe? No. And in certain boiler conversions, there's a new gas run needed, particularly when you're going from a non-condensing boiler to a condensing boiler. And usually I will leave with, because part of me thinks, well, why would they believe me if I'm the only company that's mentioned it? Why would they believe me? So sometimes I'll get my laptop out and I'll prove to them with the gas pipe sizing charts and things that actually you do need one, no ifs and buts. And sometimes I'll leave with, don't use any, whether you use me or not, doesn't matter. Don't use anybody that isn't going to put a new gas pipe in, because you'll have a boiler that the manufacturer's guarantee won't be valid on. And so,
forgive my ignorance, does that go back to the main gas supply into the house then? Where do you draw the line?
it's from the gas meter.
Right.
So
okay.
a gas pipe from the gas meter to the new boiler position. You can get up to a 50 kilowatt combination boiler. That's huge. And a 22 mil gas feed isn't going to supply you what it needs. But some engineers, I say it regularly, that I should stop being surprised at being surprised, as it were, at what you see sometimes that some people do. And so there are still even though the industry is trying to get better, there are still a lot of people that either don't know what they're doing or they just cut corners because we can self-certify our work. So it's only a year later, 2 years later, or potentially when they get a different company in to work on it, that these errors are then highlighted. And a common thing that Tom in the office has to deal with was, well, everyone else has said it's okay, and then in eight years ago it's been fine, and suddenly you come along and it's not fine. And then you think, well, who's been doing it for those 8 years? If it's the same company that doesn't know what they don't know, that will explain it. But sometimes it's several companies that are in and just not doing it right. So there are a lot of people not doing it as it should be done.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fear for that is about price, where I've found if you give people the information, those people that just want the cheapest job possible, they're probably not our target customer anyway.
Yeah, that's critical.
Because there's always someone going to be cheaper than yourself.
Mm.
So then it's about building a brand around quality, reliability. And I said years ago to my lads, I don't sell gas boilers. I sell trust and confidence and reliability. And it just so happens at the end of it, they get a fantastic boiler with up to 12-year guarantee that we can offer finance on, and everything that all the big companies can do. But it's by a smaller local company that employs the local community as well.
Yeah. Okay. On your journey, obviously, yeah, unfortunately, the industry does have some question marks over some of the abilities of some of the trades. But when you first started at Transgas, you've come from the main works that you were doing, and you moved into, say, more domestic stuff and the combination with the boilers. How did you progress from there? Where did you go from there?
I met a bathroom fitter, and he put me in touch with Checker Trade, who at the time nobody had heard of Checker Trade. So we've been with them for an awful long time, but we were getting that was until I met Steve, who does our SEO. That was the best place that we've ever advertised, and it worked. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now they try and take more and more money from you. But that's their business model. But I got introduced to them as you should be on there. These are great source of work. And so we've got over, I think it's 1,000 reviews on their site now, I think. Which is obviously an awful lot. So it's a case of, if you're looking for a company, which one are you going to use? The one that's got 10 reviews that could be by the friends. They're not normally, but that's people's suspicions. Or a company that's got 5, 6, 7, 8, 1,000 reviews. So that was one of the best bits of marketing I'd done, because that was always my biggest problem is, okay, you've got a bit of a budget to spend on marketing. Where do you spend it? And initially that was my thing was Checker Trade, and then we've since joined Trusted Trader, and we're on Which Trusted Trader. So most our advertising budget is on review sites where, yes, you pay them, but you can't get a review taken down usually. It's only if you can ultimately 100% prove that even no transaction took place that the review can get taken down. Other than that, it stays up there. Whether you think it's a fair review or not, or an honest review or not, in which some cases we've got some that don't tell the full truth. But that, in certain ways, that validates all the other reviews that you get.
If it's 100 perfect ones, sometimes a little bit suspicious.
Because now and again, also, we're not perfect. We don't employ robots. People make mistakes. So then it's how you deal with those mistakes when they get made. Because they happen. So that was one bit of marketing that we did.
With regards to Checker Trade, when you get the lead through, do you have paid staff jump on it straight away, or how do you work with that?
Yeah, so initially it was just myself, and then someone doing the subcontract work, and then I got to the stage where I need another pair of hands, and that's they've taken your first employee on, or in this case I think it was a first subcontractor full time. It's a big leap, because you go from doing what is ultimately your 60 or 70 hour week, you then suddenly need enough work for them for 40 hours, plus then, and what you're going to make on the jobs then is massively diminished. So then you also need another probably 30 hours a week extra work for you to do, so that you still actually make the same money. Because my aim was always to get off the tools. It's a physical job in what we do, and your body has a lifespan. And yes, we employ some older engineers that they enjoy the job, but they're now, one of them is on certainly a lot of lighter duties due to his body creaking and groaning.
Yeah.
One of them's still doing installs though. So he keeps himself fit and active. But it went from one employee, that's the big jump, then it was two, and then it was three, and I was just running them with paper diaries and just booking all the jobs in, taking all the phone calls, still going out doing jobs as well. And then chucking a young family, suddenly you get home, you've been on the
Life
tools all
changes.
day, you've got other challenges, young family, and then it'd be okay, play with the kids, and then as soon as they go to bed, I'd then go and work for another 3 hours, 4 hours
Yeah.
in the office. So then your relationship with your wife can potentially start to suffer. And then it got to, I think I was running 4 or 5 engineers, and then it started getting a lot harder.
And you're still on the tools at this point.
Still on the
Yeah.
tools, still basically everyone's telling you that you're really successful. And I always get choked up with this bit. But everyone starts telling you, really successful, you've got this fantastic business, but you're doing 70 hours, 80 hours.
Yeah.
You've got your family life that is then under a lot of pressure. And it all, eventually for me, it all got too much. And I ended up having a breakdown, which, excuse me.
Sorry, take a moment.
So just one day, that was it. It was sort of too much. I just went home and cried under the bed covers and decided, is this for me? And you start having all these really dark thoughts about the easy ways out and things like that. So I remember Sarah had finished work at that point, and she was at home with, I think we just had Thomas at that point, and so she took the phone, and basically I wasn't available. But when you basically are the company, you have to keep going, because otherwise the work stops, and then you're paying these engineers, and there's nothing for them to do. So you have to keep going. And so after 2 days, 3 days, it's like, okay, well, I've got to get back to it, even though you don't feel like it, and you just want
Forcing
to
yourself
jack
back.
it all in, and you've had enough, and you're basically struggling with your mental side of things to deal with the pressures. But everyone else is telling you, it's fantastic, you've got this great business, and you're doing really well. But actually, yes, you have got this great business, and it is going really well. But they don't see the other side of it, of okay, I've come home, I've played with my kids, and then I've basically have no relationship with my wife because I'm working till midnight at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And then you get up again at 6, half 6 and do it all again. So that was when start looking at the numbers, and it's a case of, we need some office staff. And for one month in November, I'd been on the phone for 60 hours.
Wow.
When the bill came in, it was 60 hours worth of phone calls. But that wasn't a single phone call from an engineer telling me they got a problem, from any customers wanting to book any jobs in. Basically, as well as running these 5 engineers, like that's, with the phone calls coming in and the phone calls with the engineers, I probably spent the equivalent of an average person's working time on the phone for 2 weeks of that month. And that was when I was saying to Sarah, my wife, who has helped grow the business, I was saying, we need some office staff. And she's like, we can't really afford them. I'm like, well, we can't afford not to. Because
Can I just interject there? Obviously, it shows the incredible resilience you've got to come through where you are, to get to where you are now. But if there's somebody listening to this that is struggling in the same way that you did, and I'm so sorry to hear that, but also, in that dichotomy, do they employ somebody? Do they carry on doing the 70 hours? What advice would you give them?
Well, our turnover, when we got office staff, the turnover went from doing this every year to suddenly doing that. And it is a case of, if you want to grow a business, ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't do everything yourself. And so if the numbers permit, certainly get some office staff, even if it's just someone part-time, or even if it's just a VA coming in doing some ad hoc work. There's a VA I know that has done some work for us, and lots of people think, well, if I do it myself, it's free. Well, actually, it's not. It's your hourly rate. So,
which is invariably a lot
which
more.
invariably is an awful lot less.
Yeah.
And even if you end up just spending more time with your family, then a business coach once said to me a long time ago, you have to pay to get your time back. And that's exactly what you have to do. Because yes, you can carry on doing it all yourself, but that's going to just limit what you can do. And what about when you want holidays, or in the summers now I have a 4-day working week? That wouldn't be possible if I didn't have a good team around me that can run the business and it doesn't need me all the time.
So it could, if anybody's listening, it could arguably be then that the figures are going to be tight, but taking one step back to go 2 steps forward, it will start to recover and you will benefit.
Yeah. And that's always the way, even when you're growing. So you've got at that particular moment, we had one lady doing 8 till 1 o'clock, and then we had a bloke doing 1 o'clock till 5:30. And that suited their lifestyles. So we had them, and it also gave us cover if one of them went off sick or if on holidays and things like that. So that worked well for us. And at the interview with Natalie, it was you might need to bring a book, because we don't actually know if there's enough for you to do. So you might get a bit bored. It turns out she chuckled many times with me about, I've still never opened a book, John, because there's always something to do. And when if the phone isn't ringing and the emails aren't coming in, you get them to do stuff that you would normally be doing. So there is always stuff for someone to do. So yeah, my advice to anybody who's at that stage, yes, you may not make as much money, but you're effectively buying your time back, and then you also get the mental headspace as well. So that getting the time back allowed me to do more training, for example. And when I wasn't training, Jan, who eventually started working for us, she could see a difference with me when work stopped me being able to train compared to when it allowed me to train. Because you get the headspace. You can solve some problems when you're out for a run. You think about different things. Sometimes you might not be thinking about work, but as most business owners know, work is something that dominates an awful lot of your thoughts.
Yeah. They don't look at their own personal health, do they?
No.
And ultimately, listening to what you said, if you had stayed down that route, your health ultimately, not only your mental health, but physical health as well, would definitely have suffered.
Yeah. It's growing a business is not easy, as every business owner will tell you. And I used to look at businesses that were flourishing and doing really well, and the business owner might not be doing so much in the business. And I used to think, oh, he's done well, hasn't he? He's sort of got it easy. But actually, some people may now look at me and think, he doesn't do that much, does he? And they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. But sometimes I don't do that much. When you've got the right team around you, sometimes you don't have to do that much. And that's the benefit of having all those struggles years and years and years ago.
That could be my definition of success, actually, where you're getting more for less, and you've structured the business, because you don't have a business and you've only got a well-paid job unless the business can operate with you. And obviously, well done for getting it where it is now.
Something that was said to me is lots of people, and particularly in the trades, lots of them just own a job where they just want to be their own boss, and some don't want to grow, and
that's fine by them.
I've met. I always said to Sarah, after I'd do every 5 years, we've got to redo our exams, and I'd always say, there was another of them old blokes on the course, and the definition of those old blokes were the ones that used to employ loads of people. They're now back just themselves, and they all say they've never been happier. And I've always said, why won't that be me? And I've always thought, why won't that be me? And then I've got to a certain stage where I now think that won't be me, because I don't want to go back on the tools. So for me, it's either I carry on as I'm doing now, or I walk away from the business, ideally with some money in my back pocket as well. So they're my might options now, but yeah, growing a business is never easy. And when you decide to go from 7 engineers to 8 engineers, and then 8 to 9 and 9 to 10, eventually at some point you then need to employ more office staff to deal with the backroom side of things. So engineer 10, for example, might not bring you an extra penny at all, or they might actually cost you money to bring in by the time you factored in the salary of another person in the office, plus obviously the pensions now that goes with that, and all, the national insurance, all the overheads associated with another member of staff in the office. So just growing the number of engineers doesn't always actually mean you're going to make more money. But ultimately, when you've got that extra member of office staff, when you've got the extra work for the 11th engineer, take out all their overheads, of course, but then the rest of that then is profit because the office can then cope with the extra workload.
Yeah. When you mentioned at the beginning you had some subcontractors, with the people you're talking about now, the engineers, are they PAYE, or have you stuck with the? At what point did you switch over from
Um,
subcontract model to
I,
PAYE,
I
and why
switched when,
did you do it?
well, Sarah doesn't know how much she contributes to the success of the business. She doesn't. I don't think she understands her value as much as I do anyway. So she used to be an accountant and so does a lot of the finances for the company. And she kept saying, you can't keep employing subbies. It's like the tax man. So Pimlico eventually got done
Yeah.
for it, I believe. So we made a decision to switch from subbies to employed purely on that's the right thing to do, being advised by my wife, who is an
She
accountant.
obviously knows best.
Well, she does.
Yeah.
And so that was why. So we still use subcontractors, but now in what you'd class as a proper subcontractor way. So ad hoc here and there when we're too busy. The downside of a seasonal industry though is when we're really busy, they tend to be usually busy. So then they're not as keen to do the work for you because they can make more money doing their own work. But then in the summer, I get phone calls, "Hi, have you any work?" It's like, well, it's summer, isn't it? And I'll let you know if we do. Now and again we might, but that's the nature of subby. So a lot of, or most of them are employed. And again, that's what I've come to like now, because you have a lot more control over not so much what they do and where they go. Well, ultimately, yes, you do, but we try and look after our engineers, try and keep them in the same area, and try and keep them near the home, and that's easier the bigger that you get. But ultimately, you can send them wherever the work is and wherever they
Yeah.
need to go. Whereas a subby may go, actually, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that.
Have you had many instances, because they got their own work outside of your projects, that they, oh, I can't make it today, I'm going to, I've got a relationship stronger with somewhere else? Obviously you've got the loyalty with your own staff,
Yeah.
but generally, if
Um,
somebody's listening and they're umming and ahhing, would you go with
if any
one way or the other?
subcontractors are listening, don't mess out the person or mess about the person that can give you regular work, because if you mess me about once, that's it.
Yeah.
It's you're not given any more work, because that's not how the relationship works. Like I will make a commitment to a subcontractor now and again of, okay, I can give you 2 days a week. In the winter I can give you 2 days a week, and then that's my commitment to them. And I tend to pay a bit more than they sometimes ask for, or a bit more than market rate, because I also want the loyalty in return. But if somebody were to phone in and go, "Hi John, I'm not in today. I've got a job somewhere else," or then it'd be okay, that's fine. But then they wouldn't work again for me as a
Yeah.
subby, because
It's your name at the top of
it's
the
my
door.
name, yeah. So they're going out representing me. When they go out to a job, then yes, they may turn up, or not may, they turn up in their own vehicle, but they're representing my company. I asked them to wear my uniform for the days that they're with me. So unless the customer's looking out the window, ultimately they're employing me as a company, and if they have any problems, it's me as a company that they will come back to. So yeah, I expect that loyalty in return. If I'm making this commitment to you, that over winter in particular, I can give you X amount of days, and in return, it's like I expect you to come into work, and not cherry pick what you will or won't do.
Okay, so with regards to the way Transgas is growing, obviously you've got a few more engineers. You've come from, as we mentioned at the beginning, and you're growing and growing. Was there any particular points in the business or any particular things that happened in the environment you were working in that made you make decisions that forced you in a direction you weren't really want to go? Or, how did you manage to stay on track all the time?
Yeah. One thing that I decided a while ago was letting agents a fantastic source of work. I say it regularly, tenants don't tend to change tap washers, and some of the complaints tenants come out with that aren't heating and plumbing related are just crazy anyway. So letting agents is always a good source of income for us. And so I went knocking on doors, and Surbiton High Street, I live in Surbiton, that's got an awful lot of letting agents. So I went knocking on some doors, and one of them was Leaders, and just so happened that that very morning, timing is a lot of things in life, that very morning the branch manager had said, we need to get a new plumber, don't we? And so that afternoon, I stroll in, a few business cards, and as it just so happens, he recognised me from playing football against me down at Wimbledon Goals, five-a-side. And I don't know if that was a good thing or not, that you remembered by one of the I'd like to think it was for my silky skills and my brilliant finishing of, we need to stop him, he's the best player on the field. But I don't think that was the case. No. But anyway, he'd remembered me. And so we sat down, had a chat, and
was he in a leg cast or anything at the time?
No, he wasn't. No. But we had a chat, and we agreed rates, and they started using us. And so that was Leaders Surbiton. And the way Leaders did it at the time, each branch had their own people in charge of property management, and they'd use who they felt like. So eventually it was, well, when are you getting us into another branch? Eventually we got into another branch in Walton, and that led to Weybridge, and that led to Epsom, and it led to Sutton, and most of them, and Kingston, and most of them, Surbiton used us all the time. Walton and Weybridge eventually used us all the time. We sort of became their go-to contractor, because part of lettings agents' jobs, they just want the problem to go away. So they don't want to give a job to a contractor and then a tenant phoning them a day later going, "Hey, what's happening with this job? I've still not heard." So we were always keen to jump on onto any job.
Do you provide a 24-hour call out?
We do now for the letting agents that want it.
Okay.
We keep talking about rolling that out to the general public. So far we've not. But yeah, there's several letting agents. So letting agents become a massive part of the business. Probably about 20% of turnover is due to letting agents. Some letting agents have national companies that attend on their emergencies. Others will use our call centre that we have, and then the calls get triaged and we either go out or we don't. Or some agents triage their own calls and then send us out, or they don't. So we offer 24/7 for certain letting agents, and that's one way to try and win a new letting agent. Is traditionally they can struggle with out of hours cover.
Is it all residential, John, or do you do, say, in developers or contractors and commercial?
Well, again, I'm conscious this is for people that are potentially wondering about growing businesses or going on growth journeys, as it were. I always steered clear of developers because I perceive that as one quick way that you can throw away a lifetime of work. There's people in Worcester pay to look after companies of my size, and they have chuckled with me in the past about these youngsters that get excited that I'm quoting on these 60 boilers in this development. That would fill me with dread, because the developer would want you to buy the 60 boilers. They'd want you to buy however many hundreds of meters of copper, and if they don't go belly up in 2-3 months' time, you might get paid. Who's got the cash flow for that for a start? And it just the uncertainty of a developer who's doing a couple of units, that's fine. And I got introduced to somebody.
Would you structure the payment arrangements different with them than you would with, say, a householder?
Yes, there'd be stage payments. And so if somebody really wanted us to get involved in that, it would be on my terms. So we've got involved in a job in Aldershot that's 15 flats that are being converted from shops into flats. There's 15 offices, sorry. There's 15 of them, and I put an invoice in, and it gets paid. There was no discussion over time frame, but eventually it's, well, if it got to the stage, it'd be, well, we're not going back until you pay the last invoice. It never did get to that stage. Within 2 or 3 weeks, it would be paid, which is okay. So I would steer clear of huge developments with builders that, like the likes of Barratt Homes, and I don't even know how you get into them, but the likes of that wouldn't be for me, because the risk is too great. Now, is the reward as well? Probably not, because the people that do what's called house bashing, which is basically chucking in systems, they tend not to be that great. They tend to be a bit more unreliable. And this is obviously very generalisations here, but my team paid usually above average market rate, because they're really good. And to get really good, if you suddenly then chucking them in to throw some heating systems in, a load of different units, the numbers just don't add up.
I suppose if you're tendering for that as well, you're going to have to force your prices down just to win it.
Yeah.
The margins are gone.
Yeah. And for me, the bigger the job, the more tendency there is that you can not make any money on it. And certain jobs that we take on, I accept are just what are called diary fillers, that particularly during the summer, it's like, okay, if we break even, it's paid the wages for 2 engineers for a month, and that will get us closer to September, October, which is when we all start not worrying about where the work's going to come from until January.
Do you set yourself targets for, say, okay, I'm going to fit so many boilers this year, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? Do you have some KPIs that you work to, or do you just know as a gut feeling, or looking at the numbers, you can see how the business is moving?
Yeah. Every business coach will probably recoil now, but I've always just ran it on gut feel. So whether it's gut feel of whether we need to employ another engineer, whether we need to employ another member of office staff, it's just been how I feel, and also my gut feel on trading conditions as well. I've had somebody from Worcester Bosch come down and see me, and they, we think it's going to be a lot better, John. And I was thinking, what are you basing that on? Because I don't think it will. And the next time I saw him, it was all doom and gloom, and sales are down, and I was like, I know, you don't need to tell me. And so I don't set targets, because ultimately there's too many variables in our market, or I think there's too many variables to set targets. Traditionally, we do, on the boiler install side, 180 to 220 a year. There's peaks and troughs, and there's different things, like there's a levy come in now on gas boilers, that's pushed all the prices up. The government's trying to force people to go to heat pumps, but the more research people do on heat pumps, the more they realise, actually, I don't want one. But gas boilers are now more expensive.
Right.
So there's no, I don't really, it sounds really bad as a business owner. I look at the bottom line. That is ultimately the number.
Well, it's worked for you.
It's worked for me. That's the number I ultimately look at, is, are we making money? And if not, it's where are we not?
In fairness, though, you mentioned your wife was an accountant, so that must have been a massive support in the background, because a lot of people in your position, as they're growing, don't have that access to somebody who understands the numbers. So from that perspective, that's probably, as you said, she doesn't appreciate what she's done. Probably indirectly, she's been an amazing support.
It also takes a fair bit of the general running of the business away from me. Of like, when we get a new employee, just the contract gets sorted now, and all the stuff that I used to do is now shared.
I had a previous guest on who was started off in your industry and went on to doing contracting, and he had similar problems because of with mental health and the struggles, and he also said that his wife, if it wasn't for his wife, the situation could have been different. And yeah, what's that saying? Behind every great man.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it is. And well, as I've said, I don't
Yeah,
think she realizes just the relief, because you've also lots of people are wondering how you can be married and basically like we sit next to each other in the office, and people are thinking, is that not too much time together?
yeah,
And it will nice one day to retire and not have the business, as it were. But we love working
yeah.
together,
That's brilliant.
and it
I think
works
one
well
day I'll
for
have
us.
to have the wives of some of the guests on
Yeah,
because they've been through the ups and
yeah,
downs with you and supported you all the way.
yeah. That's it. She's seen me at the highs and more importantly, being there for the lows as well,
Yeah.
and helped with all that support of the peaks and troughs of business.
What's your views on, say, environmental, these new kind of solar heating and all this sort of thing? What's your views on this alternative? I'm not sure if I'm right in saying alternative anymore, but the alternative forms
Yeah.
of heating.
I feel sorry for whoever's job in government it is to try and get everybody off gas, because there's only personal opinions. Heat pumps, I don't think are the solution. The heat pumps, for me, only work in new builds, and particularly only work is if you're installing solar and batteries as well, so that you can then go off peak and charge your battery up at 7 or 8p in the evenings or at night, and then use it in the day. Otherwise, people's bills are huge, and retrofit. I've stopped going out to quotes for retrofit, because when you tell people about heat pumps, and a lot of people are like, how much money is it going to save me? Well, it's not. It's going to cost you more money. So well, why would I want one? We're like, well, that's a good question. But more and more people now are doing research. I've coincidentally, I bumped into an ex-colleague on Sunday, and he'd moved over into the renewable sector and was doing heat pumps, and he's moved back into the gas industry, because,
Interesting.
to quote him, I go to work to try and make people happy, and all I was discovering was I was installing kit that eventually they'd figured out they didn't want, and then there was all the complaints about, I don't want this kit, and you fitted this, and in the end he's moved back to the gas industry. But how the government, there's talk of hydrogen boilers, so whether hydrogen is the future, I don't know, but for me, heat pumps, new builds, brilliant, everything else, no.
Not for you.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't, as I say, I feel sorry for
Yeah.
whoever's job in government it is to come up with a plan, because the infrastructure isn't there for it either, for everybody to suddenly be on electric. The cables in the streets aren't suitable for it. Lots of flats, like blocks of flats, the cables in there aren't suitable for suddenly to everybody to be on an electric boiler.
So the knock-on effect is
Yeah,
just enormous.
yeah, yeah.
So are you saying at the moment, it may in time, they may modify it, but at the moment it's just not financially viable?
No, and I've heard this talk of all the levies that are on electricity, passing them to be on gas instead. So as soon as the price of gas is here and the price of electricity is here, as soon as that starts altering, then that starts different conversations. But until that happens, if you got something that a gas boiler, you put £1 of gas in and you get 90 odd p's worth of gas out of it. A heat pump, you might put £1 worth of electricity in it and you might get £2.50 out of it. But if the price of gas or the price of electricity is 3 times, 4 times the price of gas, then it's still going to cost you more money, even though it's more efficient to run. So there's a lot of issues regarding heat pumps, and I'm not the font of all knowledge. For me, though, at this precise moment, the quotes I'm going to, when I give them the information that I have, people tend not to want one. It's only people that want to save the planet, because that's the good reason, is you can use green electricity to run it. So it's only people that traditionally have got lots of money that can then afford to have the batteries and the solar panels as well, and make it a viable way of generating electricity, and also then charging up the batteries at cheap rates, that then it becomes a viable way.
Okay, so if there was let's assume we've got a gas engineer listening, and they're thinking of going into business. What advice is there? You've obviously had some amazing successes now, but there's been some stumbling blocks, hurdles along the way. If somebody's listening right now, what advice would you give? If I was say I was an engineer, I'm thinking of starting a business, what advice would you give?
Part of me would say don't bother,
Yeah,
but no.
I'll get
Advice
a
would
paper
be,
round.
yeah, it's not easy, and so it's sort of. I always chuckle when now and again people have left me and set their own business up because they want to work whatever hours they want. And when you see the invoice come in for any subcontract and they've done it Sunday at 7 o'clock at night, it's like, are you really choosing to work then, or are you just that busy? It depends what they want to achieve. If you just want to achieve, like to own a job, as it were, and you can earn good money just being by yourself, I would say certainly do it and enjoy it. And something my mum said to me a long time ago, is people will have you work until you're virtually dead, but as long as you've just finished their job first, then they don't care about you. And I think that's sadly, I think that is true of a lot of customers. And so it would be, don't work like crazy. If you want to grow something, that's potentially what you've got to do, because you do have to have enough work in the bank to then take an employee on. So you need then 60 hours or so, 70 hours of actual work to do, so that they can then do 40 hours, you can do 30, you can do the other 10 hours of doing quotes and what have you to keep the business coming in. So that would be, do that.
Yeah,
And
there was one discussion previously where they were saying obviously about apprenticeships, and no apprenticeships kind of provide business knowledge, business training. And a lot of people are brilliant trades, but when it comes into business, they don't have any business knowledge,
yeah,
business acumen. Would you say that that is a worthwhile investment at that stage, or is, I know you've evolved, and you've obviously, your wife's been important, but you've evolved and you've got to where you are without having that input.
yeah,
But what's your views on somebody who, whatever trade is listening, because it's
yeah,
all very similar.
yeah. It is. It depends. Depends if you're a businessman or if you're a tradesman.
Yeah.
And I would like to, and I'd always like to think that I've been a businessman. I studied economics at A level and had interest in business. So if you don't really have business acumen, it's employ a business coach and invest in yourself, basically, because you will get where you want to go usually quicker. Lots of people see business coaches as, well, that's a waste of money, but a lot of them hold you accountable for things. So it's like, right, so you need to get this material so that we can do some marketing over here. If you haven't got a deadline, there's always another boiler to go and service, or there's always, like, say, an electrician, there's always another rewire to do, or whatever trade it's in. There's always something better than doing that little bit of marketing or doing that extra bit on the business. And a lot of people are working that long that they actually don't end up spending any time trying to grow the business.
Yeah.
It just grows organically. So if you've got ambitions to have a big company, take a step back and employ people to do the admin earlier, so that you can go and win
So
more
just
business.
outsourcing.
And go and
Yeah.
win in business doesn't necessarily mean doing more work yourself so you get more recommendations. Go knocking on doors. There's a million letting agents out there. Yes, it's hard to get into letting agents, but offer them something that they don't have already. So invest in an LPG course, or invest in swimming pool boilers, which is a separate exam, or make yourself different to every other gas company that will also be going in knocking on doors. Because there's no reason that they're going to suddenly switch from a company that they're really happy with to you. So unless you're going to go in as cheap as chips and you don't value your
Goes back to
time,
what we were saying. Yeah.
yeah. So my advice would be it's a lot of hard work and invest in yourself, but also then invest in the people that you employ as well. So we've I don't know how many tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands now we've spent on investing in people to make their skill set better, because ultimately then they're more valuable to the company. You can offer more different variety of things. So we work with a couple of really high end letting agents now, because we've got commercial engineers and we've got swimming pool boilers. A lot of gas engineers don't actually know the certain properties that have got 2 or 3 boilers. Even though the boilers are domestic boilers, it's a commercial installation. But a lot of domestic engineers don't know that. So we make sure that letting agents certainly do, so that the work
So
comes our way.
what is the differentiation, and what is the point it cuts over to be commercial? Is
You,
it the size?
usually it's gas pipe size,
Fine.
gas
Okay.
meter or gas
Yeah.
pipe size. So there's a property we look after. He's got I think it's 3 domestic gas boilers, but the pipework size needed to run those correctly. One of them's for the swimming pool that's miles away from the gas meter, where that boiler is. The amount of pipework in his property makes it a commercial installation. So you can only work on that if you've got your commercial qualifications.
I see.
So it's about investing in the people, but also investing in yourself as well. But also don't do what a lot of businesses do, which is business owners do, which is work yourself into the ground, because that gets you nowhere in the end. You end up burnt out and potentially end up then jacking it in and going back working for someone else, which ultimately that might be what people prefer in the end. I would always say give it a go, because worst case, if you decide it's not for you, if you're really good and you leave where you used to work on good terms, we always re-employ people that decided that the grass isn't always greener, because if they're good, they're good, and we don't hold grudges. If someone says to me, John, I want to leave and set my own business up, it's like, well, fair play to you. It's like, not going to hold it against them.
Yeah.
It's what I did all those years ago. But yeah, some decide it's not for them, and then come back and or go and work for a different company, and maybe go work for a national company with more security or an overall better package rather than just pay.
Did you move into? You mentioned LPG there. As you've grown? Obviously, you mentioned some of the commercial stuff. Have you broadened the offering?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we now do air conditioning, as we're trying to fill the diary in the summer as well as the winter. And what I discovered with the air conditioning is what I would class as proper air conditioning companies that literally only do air conditioning and do the ridiculously huge stuff, as well as more our target stuff, which may be a property wanting it in the bedrooms, for example. They tend to be fully booked in the summer, and so you've got this heating company that's now invested in several engineers that do air conditioning. Well, we're not as busy, because it's not well known that we do air conditioning. Yes, we spend the money on marketing and stuff, but we offer air conditioning. We do heat pumps. We've moved into electric boilers, underfloor heating. As I say, that's become more of a thing. Mains water boosting is becoming a lot more of a thing now and again. Speaking to the right people and being introduced to the right people probably 8 to 10 years ago. I got introduced to this bloke Merlin, and pun intended, he's a wizard with boosting water, whether that be his experiences for hotels and leisure centres and things, but convert that into 4-bed, 5-bed houses that all have an ensuite, and they all want to have the capability of using them at the same time. I've now developed the knowledge that we can provide that as an offering. We've got the warm air, which a lot of gas engineers don't have warm air, the LPG, the commercial, swimming pool boilers. So there's only fitting gas fires is pretty much the only thing that we don't do now.
Right.
And that's because that's become very bespoke, and this building works need. It's just become a trade in its own, really, a sort of a sub trade now that not many people install gas fires unless that's all they do.
Okay, going back, actually, the conversation went in a different direction, but just going back to if somebody is listening and there's 3 key points, you mentioned, I suppose, if I summarise that, probably outsourcing is what you said. Obviously, invest in yourself, but outsourcing. Was there anything else that you would say, if I had my time over again, I'd perhaps do this or do that?
I would have got office staff quicker. Basically, I would have got help quicker for several different aspects of the business. I've never employed a business coach because
They're rubbish. I wouldn't try.
well, join BNI is
Yeah.
is one thing I
Yeah,
would strongly
yeah,
say.
yeah.
And I've met an awful lot of business coaches in
Yeah.
BNI, and I've gleaned an awful
Just
lot
a
of information.
networking organisation.
Networking organisation. It's about the biggest bit of advice I would give. It's about who knows you, who thinks of you. Someone once said to me years ago, John, you don't have to be the best. You just got to be the most memorable. And so it comes back to the leaders manager. He remembered me playing football. If somebody can remember you, something my dad said decades ago. I was working as an apprentice, and I used to fit in heating with these twins. It's like, it's really weird, Dad. They don't speak to each other. They just now and again just make funny noises, and the other one responds with funny noises, and that's it. He's like, so they don't speak to the customer. I was like, no, you've got to speak to the customer, and you've got to build a rapport with the customer, and people buy from people, as well
we
known.
still do.
They still do, yeah. And so if people like you, they will buy from you. So it's about having rapport, but it's about building relationships with people, being honest, but getting out there and getting people to know of your company.
Going right back at the front end, what you said as well about if you're going to do something, do it. Don't let people down.
Yeah.
Because it's your name, it's your reputation that's important and people want to remember.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to contact you or Transgas, anybody's listening, anybody's watching, how can they contact you?
Phone 0208 399 0408. Just search Transgas Services. I wouldn't recommend searching Transgas because you don't know what might come up. But search Transgas Services. We should come up top of the list, as that's what we pay our SEO guy for. So yeah, contact us, and then just email or phone in, and I'm happy to speak to whoever.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll put something in the notes. But thanks for your time, John. I really appreciate you coming along and opening up and telling us your particular journey. And hopefully somebody out there has been in a similar position, whatever part of the journey, and you've given them a little bit of a heads up and they can avoid the pitfalls that perhaps you experienced.
Hopefully.
Thanks.
Thanks for the invite. Thank you.